Ben Hodges, thank you so much for being on the show again today. We talked before about this whole situation in Ukraine and Russia. Now, the attack on the bridge yesterday in Crimea, that's a personal blow for President Putin, and we haven't seen him responding yet on camera. What is happening there?
Well, of course, you're right. This is psychologically a blow for the Russians and I imagine for the Kremlin. But it shows that the Russians still are not able to protect their very vulnerable rear areas, the logistics lines so necessary for them to have any hope of success on the battlefield. And the Ukrainians have very skillfully been going after Russian logistics now for the past few months, and it's having an effect. The Russian reaction is going to be interesting. I think of course, the first public statement said this was obviously a terrorist attack, a truck bomb of some sort, and then they announced a commission to investigate. So kind of a classic Russian reaction.
Yes. Also, it could bring us closer to something the American President Biden said last Thursday, Armageddon. He said, we are closest to Armageddon since the Cuba crisis in '62. Do you agree with the president? Is this a very dangerous moment in time in this war?
Well, certainly it's dangerous. The Kremlin has thousands of nuclear weapons, but I would not overreact to that. I think what my president was doing was to signal to the Kremlin that yes, we take your threat serious. Yes, this is dangerous, but yes, our reaction will be even more serious. So I do not think it's likely that Russia would use a nuclear weapon. Certainly they could, but there's no advantage for them. There are zero upsides for them to do it. There's nothing that can be gained on the battlefield. There's nothing that will change the outcome for them except to make it worse. The U.S. would have to respond, obviously, because of China, North Korea, Iran, they're watching as well. And I think the president has been clear about that. But it would be a devastating response for against the Russians.
Right, because the biblical term Armageddon that's the final battle between the forces of good and evil. You don't use that term lightly, I would think. Is it wise of the president to use this term, Armageddon?
Well, I think that his spokeswoman came out and said, look, there's no change in the scenario or the assessment of what Russia is doing. And that would also be my assessment, is that the Russians' nuclear weapons are only most effective when they don't use them. If they do use them, then U.S. response would be so significant. And I think the people around President Putin in the Kremlin, they know what this is about. And they know that there is no possibility of any return to normalcy for them in the post-Putin era if they allow him to use a nuclear weapon. And I'm not sure that the military actually is prepared to let him do this with tactical nuclear weapons. At some point, President Putin has to decide, yes, it's bad to lose in Ukraine, but it's much worse to lose in Russia. And so I think he's got to be thinking, what does he have to do to make sure his own regime survives?
Yes. Your former colleague, retired general and CIA chief Petraeus said, in that scenario, if he is using a tactical nuclear weapon, then NATO has to destroy all the Russian troops, equipment in Ukraine and the Russian Black Sea fleet. Do you agree with him?
So I was with General Petraeus at the Warsaw Security Forum last week. I don't think that's exactly how he said it. I believe what he was trying to communicate is that the response from the United States would include there are multiple response options: kinetic, non-kinetic, nuclear, non-nuclear. Examples of the type of kinetic responses that would not be nuclear might include destroying part or all of the Black Sea Fleet or other Russian facilities and capabilities inside Ukraine. Whatever the response, I am sure of three things. Number one, it will be done in consultation with allies, because allies will have to deal with the consequences.
Will there be time for that? Is there time to talk to your allies in that scenario?
Of course. I would imagine that they are talking already about the possibilities. Look, the administration has done a very good job working with allies, sharing intelligence before February 24th. You know that the contact group that meets every month, these are the big formal things that are happening.
But General, I was talking about if Putin uses this weapon, and I mean, it's the unthinkable decision. If he would use it, there is no time anymore to have consultations with your allies in Europe. Then you have to act, right?
Sorry, no, that's not true. There's plenty of time. It's up to the president. And look, the responses would be coordinated ahead of this. And I would expect that they would be proportional to whatever the Russians might do. That's the second condition. And the third condition or criteria is that they would be done in a way that did not automatically lead to escalation. In other words, it would not be something done inside of Russia unless, in my view, the missile or weapon came from Russia. So proportional, coordinated, and not automatically escalatory. These are the kind of things I imagine that the president is working on with his allies as well as with his own staff.
Is it fair to say that President Putin is cornered right now and that there almost are no options for him anymore?
No, that's not true at all. He's not cornered. He is in a place he put himself. A corner means, there's no way out. Of course there's a way out. He can immediately say, we're leaving. I mean, there's a gigantic opportunity for him to leave, to pull his troops out. This entire situation is 100% because of the president of the Russian Federation. He could stop it anytime.
It doesn't look likely that he will. Do you think that he still has the full support of the Russian army and his secret service FSB? Are they still in this game?
Yeah, of course I don't know, but my sense is that there is a growing a rift between the Kremlin and the general staff. When you see things like Mr. Kadyrov, the Chechen leader, being promoted, even though the Chechens have said none of their troops will be, none of their people will be mobilized. This Pedrosian, the head of the Wagner group, he has his own private army also. None of these things and none of the reactions I'm seeing over the last few weeks, especially in the aftermath of the so-called partial mobilization, indicate any kind of a coherent or cohesive response by Russian forces. I think that there are serious power struggles going on inside the Kremlin right now.
So as you know, the President Putin turned 70 this week. It was his birthday. How many days or weeks or months do you give him in the Kremlin?
Well, he got a heck of a birthday present with the destruction of his big bridge, or the damage to it. I think that there are centrifugal forces in effect inside of Russia right now. Very unhappy population. They clearly do not have their heart in this war. That's why almost 500,000 of them left to avoid being mobilized. And there's already about 4 million or so Russians that left over the past few years because they see where things are going. I don't see any really bright days on the horizon for Russia because of choices and mistakes they have made. Honestly, I don't advocate for regime change. It never works out well unless it's organic. But I would be surprised if he has his 71st birthday still in office.
That's a strong statement. And do you then also think, militarily, that it's possible for Ukraine to get their territory back in full that the Russians took from them since 2014?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that the Ukrainians are going to push Russians back to the 23 February line before the end of this year. And I believe that they will have liberated Crimea by next summer.
Ben Hodges, thank you so much for your time again this morning in Buitenhof. Thank you.
Thank you for the privilege.
Bedankt voor het kijken. Vond je dit een goed gesprek? Vergeet dan niet te abonneren. Een like of een reactie achterlaten kan natuurlijk ook. Of bekijk een van de andere interviews op dit kanaal.